recorded a long time ago. A real long time ago. In fact, I don't even think LazyCon had happened by the time this video was recorded, but I have finally gotten around to editing it, so here it is. I reference a lot of things going on in my life and in the Commander Radix sphere at that time, but it's not really that much relevant. This was also coming out during a time when I was trying to streamline my content to have sort of the same style of me in front of a camera. I have since abandoned that, so anytime I talk about this new style or whatever, just know that that new style has come and gone, so that's how old this video is. But without further ado, here's the video. They say that they discovered a interestingly shaped skull in the Sahara Desert that dates to about 5 million years ago. And it's a very interesting skull, found in Chad, that has, like, some of the characteristics of a human, but some of the characteristics of a chimpanzee, suggesting a branch of evolution from the sort of Pan genus, some common ancestor between the two. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Primus Academy. We're shaking up the format here. This is actually going to be more of the format that I use for most of my videos to sort of streamline the content, to maybe help people who are fans of other sorts of content have more in common with the other types of content I do. I figured that's the best way to go, streamline stuff. That doesn't mean Primus Academy isn't going to keep its scholarship. It's not going to all of a sudden do or go out with the intention of saying anything unsourced. We're still an academic series. And the fact of the matter is, some of you guys don't know your world history. You might think you know your world history, but you could use a little brushing up. And so that's what I'm setting out to do for you guys today. Today marks the beginning of a new series on the Primus Academy series. A series devoted to a sort of high school level world history class. That's right, we're giving you a brief outline of the world and its history. This actually comes from a Twitter poll I did a few days ago. Recording-wise. For you guys, it will be like last month. But I asked if you guys wanted a basic high school level outline history course on the American history or on world history. There was overwhelming support for world history, so that's what brings me here for you today. And where else can we start with world history than the beginning of the world? Now hold on, you gotta do... It starts at the beginning of humanity. Oh, we're starting with the history of humanity. Then why is it called world history? Why don't we talk about the formation of Earth? Can't just do the world how many people know why there's a big moon orbiting us? Easier, but human history Okay, you're the boss. I've been told by my sponsors, it's human history. It's going to start off with the beginning of humanity and not the beginning of the Earth. I recorded those two parts completely without a script, and I didn't even plan on doing it until I started doing it, so I hope the conversation between me and my sponsor made sense. Australopithecus. That took me a few tries. Australopithecus popped up in the neighborhood around 4 to 5 million years ago. Supposedly... Scroll. Okay, there we go. My computer's over there. I'm trying to look at my notes. Don't sue me for using a mouse. So it's around 5 million years ago that it's generally accepted that Australopithecus popped up in Africa. Australopithecus looks kind of like this boy over here. The beginning of when different primate species began to just walk on two legs and just, walk upright. Australopithecus specifically means like southern ape or something like that. And it had a brain about 1/3 the size of modern day humans. What an idiot. My own ancestor. So with Australopithecus we see what's called the early hominids. The Australopithecus is the first hominid, the first primate walking up on two legs, just walking around like it owns the place. because I guess it does. 3 million years ago is when we start to see some shifts in these early hominids, and we enter what we call the latter hominids. One of the big differences between early hominids and latter hominids is in about 2.6 million years ago, these early hominids started to use tools. They started to see rock and realize, hey, you can do stuff with rock. And these were stone tools, and by 2.5 million years ago, we entered what was called the Stone Age, because our tools are made of stone. If you want to sound fancy, the Stone Age is also called the Paleolithic Era. That's fun to bring up at parties. We're going to talk about the first part of the Paleolithic Era, called the Old Stone Age. An alternative name for the Paleolithic Era is the Old Stone Age, because there is also a New Stone Age, which we will get to. That's right, we're covering the basic outline of the entire Stone Age right here. By 2.4 million years ago, we have this dude pop up in Africa called the Homo habilis, or habilis, which means handyman. So this is Bob the Builder. It's not Bob the Builder, it's Homo habilis. Get out of here. Now, Homo habilis used crude stoneworks. They made these simple little stone tools that they could chop stuff and scrape stuff, and basically anything you can do with a stone. And I can say that safely because Homo habilis had the brain of about half the size of a modern-day human. So, Homo habilis could probably school the Australopithecus, but let's just say it's not as smart as a 5th grader. One thing that helped the Homo habilis is that their teeth were smaller and their hands were smaller than the big ape hands that Australopithecus had. With these hands, they could grasp objects much better. They had learned that they could just beat rocks together until you could create like sharper objects, sort of like the predecessor to grinding to sharpen blades. I'm looking at my notes, and I wrote my notes in a very shorthand form, and since we're talking about like pre-human caveman stuff, it's weird. It's like, struck rock, made sharp edge, cut meat, chop roots, scrape meat, improve life. Like I wrote my own notes feel like caveman notes. But that's some other things they could do. They could cut meat, they could chop roots, they could scrape the meat from bones of animals. So this improved their survival because now they have an easier access to food. They aren't just beating to death a gazelle and just biting into it. Now they can, scrape the meat off. Around 2 to 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus pops up. Yes, you can laugh. Go ahead. Are we done? Alright. Homo erectus means upright man. And Homo erectus is pretty close to the modern human. They were able to use early stone tools, notably the hand axe. They also learned to control fire, but they didn't make fire. Basically, when lightning came down and made fire, they knew how to use it. They knew, alright, there's this fire here now, let's try to cook something with it. But they couldn't make fire. But with their more advanced tools, they were much more advanced hunters than the Homo habilis and the Australopithecus. I think Australopithecus hunting was a lot more like animal hunting than like when you think of humans hunting. Homo erectus managed to use flint to make to make tools that are more easier to create. Because flint is a lot more malleable, flint is easier to shape into different tools. With these tools, they were able to make, they would be able to dig. They could chop down tree limbs so they could get through the crazy wilderness of the time. Plus, they could cut through thick animal hides. All of a sudden, animals that they couldn't hunt down, that were had really tough hides, well, now they could, chop that up. They're upgrading their tools in their Minecraft survival server. I say that as a joke, but a lot of this actually corresponds with how civilization develops in Minecraft survival servers. With the ability to control fire, they could cook, like I said, but they also could provide themselves heat. They understood, hey, fire hot. With this fire, they could get some protection because it could be used as a weapon. With fire, they were able to live in more colder climates, though not to the scale we'll see other humans later on in the timeline harness cold. 1.6 million years ago, the Ice Age strikes. Not the film franchise, the real franchise. Earth begins to face a lot of freezing weather. Glaciers are forming and then going back and forming and going back and forming and going back and forming. And whenever this happens, whenever the glaciers move back and forth, the water levels rise and fall and rise and fall. And that's how you get some places that used to be underwater that are available up on the surface. And these would become land bridges, which would be good opportunities for migration. Probably the most famous land bridge would be the Bering Land Bridge, the one that connected Asia to North America. Now, this sudden change in climate led to many in Africa to go out and explore the world and try to colonize, is that even the right word for this stage of civilization? To settle down in other areas. We know Homo erectus was the first to migrate out of Africa, because we see Homo erectus fossils all over Europe and Asia, so Homo erectus sort of kabam got out there. The fact that they could control fire and that they walked upright really helped them to travel, because walking upright enables you to do more walking, as opposed to like what the Homo habilis and Australopithecus did, which was more of a slouched over monkey-style walk. By 50,000 BCE, roughly, these are, when you see these BCEs pop up, they're very rough estimates, but by 500,000 BCE, hominids were living all across Europe. In 200,000 BCE, a branch of what we assume to be the Homo erectus eventually evolved into Neanderthals, or Neanderthals. I've heard it pronounced two different ways. I'll be calling them Neanderthals for the purpose of this video. And the Neanderthals had pretty much full reign over Europe, also a little bit into the Eurasia area. They evolved more to deal with the colder climate of Europe, to be a lot shorter, a lot stockier, to be able to handle the cold. But around the same time the Neanderthals popped out, so did Homo sapiens, meaning wise man. Homo sapiens are what we are, modern humans. Homo sapiens are believed to come out of the Homo erectus in Africa, but not all Homo erectus became Homo sapien. So, picture we have Africa, we have the world, we have Africa and the world. Homo erectus are in all of these places, but Homo sapiens pop up in Africa exclusively. So by the time modern humans exist, there are human-ish creatures roaming around the planet that have full reign over the planet, or over certain parts of the planet. Homo sapiens are the smartest of these different hominids, and they can create a large, wide range of tools with these stone stuff. They also learned to create fire. They figured out how fire works and how you can spark a fire yourself. And one of the biggest things that changed Homo sapiens is language. Homo sapiens could talk to each other because they had a more advanced brain that allowed for more language, and also more speech-related organs. With their different tools, they were able to build shelters. Although often they lived in near rock overhangs or in caves, hence cavemen. I should also note that early Homo sapien societies were hunter-gatherer societies, where the men would go out and hunt, and the women would gather food, gather berries and stuff like that. And both of these were considered very valuable roles in society. So what this ultimately resulted in was an egalitarian society where everyone were equal regardless of gender. That's how things worked in hunter-gatherer societies. A collectivist society where everyone lived in peace. But seriously, the hunter-gatherer society is often considered one of the most egalitarian periods of human history, where men and women were equal. So catching fish, gathering nuts, all this stuff helped build up Homo sapien society. And they would live like this, on this struggle, on this grind, for hundreds of thousands of years. Many of them would live as nomads. They would follow the animals around where the animals went. Why? Because farming didn't exist yet. This is that Minecraft era where you're just going around killing animals, but you haven't exactly put any of them in an enclosed area yet. 100,000 BCE. At this point, wood was starting to become more used. There were better tools made out of wood, as well as bone and stone. And so we're not just dealing with stone here. With the harnessing of wood, you could create wooden handles for tools. You could create arrows or spears. And once you have spears and arrows, you can hunt prey way further away. All of a sudden, that mammoth over there, that it would take a whole team of people, me and the boys going out to hunt down mammoths, me and the boys returning from hunting a mammoth, well, now we can just go green arrow that crap. String was being invented through plant fibers, which I know these people are living literally 100,000 years ago, but I don't know how to make string out of a plant fiber right now in 2019. With string, they were able to create nets, and with nets, all of a sudden fishing becomes a lot more easier. Bone hooks, fishing spears, canoes were invented around this time. With canoes, like these prehistoric canoes, you were able to go down the rivers, which was a major form of transportation for people living near a river. Stone Age life was starting to improve. But at the same time, we are still dealing with this Ice Age. Homo sapiens want to get out of here. So in about 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens start to move out of Africa. And of course, Homo erectus are already there. So there were really two waves of human migration. The Homo or hominid migration. The Homo erectus scattering across the world, and Homo sapiens following up a few hundred thousand years later. Now, because of how the Ice Age worked, places like Europe and Northern Asia were way too cold for most Homo sapiens to go into. What they would typically do is go down this southern route. They would come out of Africa into the Middle East and into South Asia and stuff like that, the warmer areas. Because of the cold weather and the mountains, going up into Northern Asia and Europe were much more difficult, but eventually humans were going up there as well. In 40,000 BCE, thereabouts, the Cro-Magnons arrive in Europe. Cro-Magnon is just really the term we use for Homo sapiens in Europe at this time. Now, the Cro-Magnons were sort of a stronger stock than a lot of other Homo sapiens in the fact that they were going out into this freezing area of Europe. They were a lot stronger, they were a lot stockier, and they also had really, really good hunting abilities, top cream of the crop. The Cro-Magnons were pretty intense for Homo sapiens. They were living in this frigid area, which most Homo sapiens didn't want to live in. They lived alongside the Neanderthals, which, you have this weird creature that's kind of like you, just chilling already in Europe, and you're like, hey, we're the neighbors, we're new guys. But the Cro-Magnons also had great hunting skills, and they had brains. They had brains. They did art, is what I'm saying. There are some caves which have around 600 images of animals and daily life of these Cro-Magnon people. So you see art originate here, and you don't really see art pop up in most other places as early as this. But this is over in France, by the way, so they've been traveling a long while by the time they're making art around 17,000 years ago. Now, it's controversial, but I think I have to mention that because it took a certain type of Homo sapien to go out into this colder area, it meant that these Homo sapiens had to be smarter than most other Homo sapiens. And, by the virtue of Homo sapiens and these Cro-Magnons living in these colder areas, they had to be more smarter about their life. And that's where you see the argument of an explanation as to why IQs are dispersed differently throughout different racial populations. However, I should also note that's very controversial, and many, if not most, historians will outright dismiss this theory, or dismiss the idea that IQ distributions are different across racial populations altogether. They will dismiss that. But I think some people will want me to mention that stuff. So, with the Homo sapiens migrating out of Africa, they encountered different new people, these Homo erectus, new terrain. They had to adapt to this different terrain. There were different plants, there were different animals. New tools and new skills were needed to adapt to these environments. In colder areas, the Homo sapiens learned to create needles from bone and learned how to thread together cloth and animal skins for clothing, for protection. Carrying sacks were sewn, which increases your carrying capacity. New shelters were being built, a lot of them dug into the ground and covered with leaves or branches as a roof. Some Homo sapiens even created wooden frames for their homes. In Eastern Europe, though, being Eastern Europe, they have to do it a little bit differently. Wood was scarce in Eastern Europe, so what they did was create houses out of large mammoth bones. In 30,000 BCE, the Neanderthals die. There's a lot of different theories about this. Maybe they heavily intermarried with the Cro-Magnons. Maybe the Cro-Magnons killed them all. The Neanderthals disappeared. 10,000 BCE is generally when we consider the Stone Age to end, and we'll get to the end of the Stone Age later, but by 9,000 BCE, humanity had spread to every single continent except Antarctica. I believe South America was the last continent to be settled by humans, because the Bering Land Bridge was a fairly recent thing. You had to wait for people to get up to northern Asia to be able to cross the bridge to begin with. And then you had to move all the way down. But by 9,000 BCE, this human migration has completed. Humans are everywhere except Antarctica. I should also mention another theory here that contests the out of Africa theory, which suggests that Homo sapiens developed through different Homo erectus populations across the world. But that doesn't particularly match any of the migration trends we see. It would also suggest that the different races of Homo sapiens are completely different creatures altogether. Most historians and experts generally accept the out of Africa theory, though it's certainly one that we're still researching. We could find different evidence as soon as tomorrow. So it's around 10,000 BCE that the Ice Age ends. And with the end of the Ice Age, people are starting to take notice of different plants growing and how they grew. Particularly if they were to go out and get some berries, with their hunter-gatherer society, they're noticing that sometimes the plants would grow or leave some little seeds that would grow. And all of a sudden, these Homo sapiens are looking at this and oh, seeds can cause stuff to grow, which leads to farming and agriculture. With the beginning of agriculture, we enter the Neolithic Age, the New Stone Era. And this is generally called the Agricultural Revolution or the Neolithic Revolution, but it's the end of the hunter-gatherer system for many parts of society, or many different societies, and the beginning of a farming situation where people are no longer being nomads, they're settling down because they have an available source of food. Also, all of a sudden, a lot of the work that the women would do was considered worthless, although at the beginning, for most of the Neolithic Revolution, hunter-gatherer societies were continuing their hunting and gathering alongside farming. But as time went on, women's role of gathering became less and less of as important as hunting, and we start to see a gender disparity in different societies at the time. The earliest evidence of farms come around the Middle East area, especially around 8,000 BCE. And by 7,000 BCE, we have cattle farming in the Sahara Desert. And around these farms, humans are gathering, and eventually you're getting villages. And once you're getting villages, eventually you're getting cities. And eventually you'll get people moving to different cities, and you're getting a situation in which we live in a society. Gamers rise up. The language helps this. Art helps develop culture. And we even see signs of spiritual beliefs. Both the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals would bury their dead and then place food. They would place food and other objects on their graves, which suggests that they believed in a sort of afterlife. So already we're getting different signs of religion. And so people are getting together with some art, some culture, the same language, different spiritual beliefs. We're getting culture. We're getting civilization. And that, my friends, is the dawn of society. And that's going to wrap up the first episode of the Primus Academy World History Series. I hope you've enjoyed. There are other Primus Academy videos around the channel, so feel free to go check those out. I do a lot of other different videos on the channel as well in this sort of style. At least I'm trying to do this sort of style more mainstreamed or streamlined. So if you like this channel, like what I do, go ahead and subscribe for me there. It's the good thing to do. I also do a podcast with a group of friends on the Lazy KOALAS channel. Go check that out. Link is in the description. Please subscribe. In fact, I'll play a little clip from the Lazy KOALAS podcast to see if it suits your fancy. Let me just say, I want to burn Atlanta to the ground. Sherman didn't do a good enough job. I need to do it better. Specifically, I want the epicenter of my flaming vengeance to be the Atlanta airport. Now, you might say, no, Radix. Airport security and threats are kind of a touchy subject. You might not want to do that online. Are you sure? Or, just to be clear, are you making a terrorist threat against the Atlanta airport? The answer is yes, absolutely. My Twitter is available for public updates and other memes I want to post. Instagram is also where I put a lot of memes and photos of Japan once I move over there. The Discord server is available in the description if you want to just chill and hang out with me, because I'm almost always in there. And you can also chill out and meet some other fans and friends of the channel. So don't be afraid to check us out there. And yeah, that wraps up the first episode of the Primus Academy World History class. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.
They set fire to the forest, hoping they would catch the bear. I'm as guilty as they promised. All the lilies did turn black.